So, have you ever heard the rumor that it's illegal to carry an ice cream cone in your back pocket? Or, maybe you've stumbled across that bizarre internet claim that somewhere in America you can literally be fined for tying a giraffe to a telephone pole. I mean, at first glance, these just sound like complete internet jokes, right? Why on earth would anyone even think to regulate where you keep your ice cream? But the truth behind these claims is actually this totally fascinating window into America's past.
Okay, let's dive into this because, as it turns out, that ice cream cone law wasn't a joke at all. Back in the late 19th century, horses were incredibly valuable. We're talking absolutely essential for farming, transportation, business, the whole shebang. And horse thieves, well, they were getting pretty clever. Instead of forcibly stealing a horse, which, by the way, carried some pretty severe penalties, a thief might just stick a treat like ice cream or sugar right in their back pocket. The horse would just willingly follow them away. So by creating these highly specific local ordinances against luring animals this way, lawmakers were trying to stop a very real 19th century problem.
Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're going to explore how America's weirdest laws are so much more than just funny trivia. They're actually perfect, untouched legal time capsules. By looking at these seemingly absurd rules, we can uncover exactly what previous generations feared, how they lived, and the incredible challenges they had to overcome. It's a fascinating look at American history, and it's hidden right in plain sight within the legal code.
Section 1. America's Weirdest Legal Myths.
Right, so before we look at the real history, we really have to separate genuine legal time capsules from pure internet folklore. To make sense of the whole thing, legal historians organize weird laws into three distinct buckets. First up, you have enforced laws. These are rules that might sound kind of strange to us now, but they're still actively used today for very good reasons. Second, we have obsolete laws. These are written into the codes maybe over 100 years ago, but they're completely ignored and unenforced today. And finally, the third bucket, fictional. These are the pure internet myths that literally lack any actual legal evidence whatsoever.
Let's look at that fictional bucket for a second, because you've probably seen those viral lists claiming it's illegal to sing in a swimsuit, whistle underwater, or, my personal favorite, let a donkey sleep in a bathtub. Some sites even claim there's a law against hunting whales from moving cars. Well, when legal researchers actually dig into these, they usually find absolutely nothing, zero. Many of these originated as literal newspaper jokes decades ago, or they were hyper-local misunderstandings that just got blown completely out of proportion. So, if you see a list of weird laws online, definitely take it with a grain of salt.
Section 2. A Nation of Many Laws.
So if we strip away all the internet myths, why do so many genuinely strange laws still exist? The simple answer is decentralization. In the United States, laws stack up layer upon layer, kind of like a giant legal cake. You have the federal government making nationwide laws, sure, but then all 50 states write their own unique laws on top of that. Below that, counties establish regional regulations, and then municipal governments create ordinances for individual cities and small towns. Because of this layered system, two neighboring towns can experiment with completely different rules for the exact same activity, all based on their hyperlocal needs at the time.
Now multiply those layers across hundreds of years of history, and you get tens of thousands of active laws and regulations. It is a staggering volume of legislation. Every generation comes in and adds their own new layer of rules to solve their specific problems. But very few generations actually take the time to clean out the old ones. This massive bureaucratic weight makes it incredibly easy for some highly specific 19th century ordinance to just get buried and forgotten in the paperwork.
Section 3. Animals, Cars, and Technology.
Now that we understand how these laws pile up, let's look at why they were written in the first place. The late 19th and early 20th century saw incredibly rapid environmental changes and massive technological leaps. When society changes that fast, lawmakers absolutely scramble to write highly specific local rules just to keep the peace. I want you to literally imagine walking down an American street in the 1800s. It wasn't the asphalt, traffic lights, and modern sanitation we know today. No way. It was dirt roads, there was horse manure everywhere. Stray pigs and chickens were just wandering freely in front of businesses. When you visualize that chaos, early laws appointing local animal impounders to capture wandering livestock suddenly don't seem weird at all. Actually, they feel incredibly logical. They were just desperate attempts to maintain basic public hygiene and order.
And laws were also tailored to very specific local environments. For example, in Arizona, there are severe legal penalties for damaging or stealing a saguaro cactus. Taken out of context, a strict law about a cactus might seem pretty funny. But zoom out for a second and you realize these iconic plants take decades to grow and can live for well over a century. This isn't just some quirky local rule. It's a critical, macro-level protection for a highly fragile, slow-growing desert ecosystem that was being rapidly threatened by human settlement.
Then, of course, came the automobile, which completely upended everything. And this brilliantly illustrates how the law has to constantly adapt to technology. In the early 1900s, laws explicitly required drivers to stop their noisy, terrifying cars if they saw a horse getting panicked on the road. By the 1920s, the laws evolved to introduce the very first traffic lights and surprisingly low speed limits. And then, by the 1980s, science and crash research prompted the seatbelt laws we all know today. The legal code is literally a timeline of technological progress.
Section 4. Public Health and Daily Life.
Beyond technology, early laws also had to deal with our daily health, our safety, and the food we put in our bodies. As American towns expanded into crowded cities, the potential for disaster skyrocketed, and lawmakers had to act fast. Think about early colonial settlements. They were made almost entirely of wood, packed closely together, with open flames used for light and heating. One tiny mistake could burn an entire town to the ground. That existential threat is exactly why early laws legally mandated that residents own leather fire buckets and keep them ready at all times. It was primitive, sure, and entirely community-driven. Today, obviously, we don't need leather buckets because those early panic-driven mandates evolved into today's highly complex modern building codes featuring sprinklers, emergency exits, and strict structural strength requirements.
Early lawmakers also wanted to regulate public morality and the rhythm of the community, which led to what we call blue laws. These were early colonial laws that restricted business activities, banned certain entertainment, and limited alcohol sales on Sundays. The goal was to force a shared day of rest upon the community. While most of these have vanished over the years, if you've ever wondered why you can't buy a car or purchase alcohol on a Sunday morning in certain modern American towns, well, you are feeling the direct, lingering influence of a 300-year-old blue law. But honestly, perhaps the most shocking area of historical law deals with what we ate. In the 1800s, food fraud was an absolute nightmare. With no oversight whatsoever, dishonest sellers would dilute milk with contaminated water. They mixed butter with cheap, unsafe ingredients. Coffee was padded out with roasted grains. And incredibly, this one is absolutely wild, expensive spices were routinely stretched with actual sawdust. It was this disgusting, rampant 19th century food fraud that forced governments to step in and create the strict modern food safety bureaucracy we rely on today. So the crucial point is exactly what this quote captures. What seems like unnecessary bureaucracy today often exists because previous generations experienced serious public health problems. The next time you see a seemingly excessive health code rating at a restaurant, or you're squinting at a complicated nutrition label on your groceries, remember the sawdust. These rules aren't just red tape designed to annoy us. They were born out of absolute necessity, and they have undoubtedly saved countless lives.
Section 5. Why old laws survive.
Which brings us to a final, really important question. If we know that laws about horse and pounders and fire buckets are totally obsolete, why don't outdated laws just get deleted? Well, look at where lawmakers actually spend their time. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is that a typical legislative body is completely slammed. They spend their time fighting over the budget and the economy, they're figuring out healthcare and education, and they're tackling infrastructure and crime. You'll notice what takes up 0% of their priority list: repealing old, harmless laws. Lawmakers simply prioritize pressing modern issues. They have absolutely zero political incentive, or time for that matter, to clean up a harmless 19th century ordinance about carrying ice cream in your pocket.
And that's largely because deleting a law is surprisingly tedious. They don't just naturally expire. To get rid of one, a lawmaker first has to identify it buried deep in thousands of pages of code. Then, they have to draft a formal repeal bill. That bill has to go through committee reviews, debate, and finally secure legislative approval. It is an enormous amount of bureaucratic effort just to delete a single forgotten rule. Contrast that with the absolute ease of just leaving it on the books unnoticed. It's no wonder they survive. That being said, laws certainly can be removed, provided there is enough public pressure. The ultimate example of this, of course, is prohibition. Back in 1920, the 18th Amendment banned alcohol nationwide. But over the next 13 years, the law backfired massively, leading to a huge rise in illegal alcohol and organized crime. By 1933, society and public opinion had dramatically shifted, forcing the government to pass the 21st Amendment, repealing prohibition entirely. When an old law causes real modern friction, it gets removed. But when it doesn't, it just becomes a time capsule.
And that is exactly what these weird laws are. Valuable, historical snapshots of another era. They aren't just funny quirks of a broken system. They show us exactly how earlier generations of Americans tried to solve real, sometimes terrifying problems with the very limited tools and knowledge they had at their disposal. They show a nation evolving, street by street and law by law. Which leaves us with a pretty fascinating thought to end on. If the law is constantly adapting to society and technology, our current rules aren't immune to time either. Hundreds of years from now, as future generations navigate a world we probably can't even imagine, which of our totally normal everyday laws will their internet be laughing at? I mean, it kind of makes you look at that speed limit sign or drone regulation a little bit differently, doesn't it? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep asking questions, and I'll catch you in the next one.